This is Tony, and welcome to the Collective Neighborhood. Ahoy, ahoy! It's the Collective Neighborhood podcast where I stroll into my neighborhood to speak to my neighbors to get a first hand account of their lives, professions, and hobbies. These are their stories. So here's what's happening today in the neighborhood. One of my artist neighbors, Adrian Amjadi, is an artist and individual that inspires me quite a bit. Adrian is what I aspire to be. He does all the jobs I want to do. He has the level of knowledge that I would like to have to teach the next generation of artists, and he makes toys. Adrian is currently the head technician for the whole art department at El Camino College, while also being a freelance toy designer and illustrator, a sculpture artist, and he has created 2 of his own lines of art toys. Adrian is literally the perfect neighbor to talk to about my future because it's like talking to the future. Okay, so let's start with the present, right? So,
Yeah.
Adrian, and what's your background? Like, where are you from? Give me some of that. Give me some of that before we jump into it.
Yeah. I was born in Wayne, Michigan, and then apparently Wayne, Michigan sucks, and so my parents then moved out to California. California doesn't suck. It's just very expensive. Yeah. And my dad is Iranian, and my mom is a cracker from America. She's made up of some weird European stuff, German, Irish, all that weird stuff.
This is gonna be a spicy interview. I can already tell.
Not.
All right. So let's start with the present, right? You're currently working at El Camino, right?
Yeah.
And can you describe your position with El Camino College, specifically in your department?
Yeah. It's weird. My job is kind of diverse. So it's stretched pretty wide on the application that I filled in. So I'm the lab tech and supervisor. So I look after all the employees there that are non-faculty and non-administrative staff. Used to be over like a lot of the student employees and some of the temporary non-classified employees. In charge of health and safety, purchasing. Of course, I fix everything. That's kind of the point. Help with curriculum matters. Watch the police drive by. Yeah, stuff like that. Like just a lot of planning, trying to move us into the future, with digital stuff. Even help the instructors with their digital concerns, problems, which are numerous and frequent. That's pretty much the gist of it. I mean, obviously, do some of the teaching and training for some of the students. More of the high-end stuff, not so much the everyday tasks and scheduling and lessons that they have.
Of course.
But when they want to know something that's slightly beyond the instructor's reach, or if the instructors want something more than what they already know, they come to me.
That makes sense. Yes, I believe the first time we met was in that back room, the 3D print room. That yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Sure.
Yeah,
Why
let's
not?
sum it up to that because I usually don't remember how I meet people. I just know that I know them. Yeah. Adrian, tell me about how you got into El Camino. Like that's where I know you from, so let's start from there.
Yeah. Oh crap. That's actually a long journey, but I'll try to speed it up, I
Yeah.
suppose. I was a student at Cal State Northridge, and I was helping out there while obviously an undergrad, and I had an instructor named Russell McMillan,
We all love
and
Russell.
he was getting his MFA at the time, and he was then teaching at a place called Hollywood Cinema Production Resources, and I ended up teaching there and working with him shortly after he started, which was in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, I think early 2000s. And then he got a job at El Camino College as being a sculptor instructor. And he told me about it, and I would go over there and visit here and there. And well, he was working there for a little bit, and I ended up getting a really crummy instructor as his replacement at Northridge.
Interesting. Yes.
And it's not, well, should I say that he's crummy? No, he's crummy. I think he was fired. Yeah, he was
You
crummy.
you can be honest. You can be honest in this podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't see eye to eye. I saw him leading a lot of students astray, and he didn't particularly care for me. So I took my projects and I went down to El Camino and I would work on them there, and then drive all the way back to Northridge and work on them up there or turn them in or whatever. And then in doing that, since I was around so often, I got a commission while I was at at El Camino, and it was doing some large-scale bronze public artworks.
Mm.
And I got hired to help with that. And then I was there a little bit more, and I was doing internships, and I was working in special effects and all this stuff. And then basically I ended up getting hired part-time at El Camino, doing like little TA type stuff so I could get a studio and help them out.
Yeah.
And then the gallery wanted to hire me. And they did, and I was a preparator for years at the gallery and other galleries around Los Angeles. And then the lab technician before me, my predecessor, his name was Paul Weber.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a great guy, older gentleman, a bit surly and all this stuff, really great. And he knew me pretty well and suggested this job to me when he was retiring. He got rubbed the wrong way, so he was out.
I see.
And then he told me it'd be a great job for me. And had he mentioned it any earlier, I probably wouldn't have gone for it. But I was in a gnarly car accident just before that, and I lost all my special effects jobs, and I couldn't do anything for a really long time. It was close to 2 years.
Good Lord, yeah.
And then, and then I applied for that job and got it, and it's kind of perfect. It's a perfect fit. So that's how I ended up at Elko.
So would you say a lot of what had happened was chance coincidence, building on chance? I mean, clearly you put yourself in the presence of connections, but at the same time, it's almost like a chance thing, right? It just kept building and building, where you're like, oh, I'm here, and then.
I don't know. I mean, there was just so many things that I don't want to say went right or went wrong, but there were just so many opportunities to kind of choose one's own path. I was really into special effects. I wanted to work at all these big companies. I worked for many of them. And then I just found that wasn't really the life I wanted. It wasn't, jumping from job to job or not having anything permanent. It's not that I couldn't handle that. I did quite well during it. I made more than I make now. But it's annoying and stressful. And I just can't see doing that for a prolonged period of time because it doesn't make you want to be creative on your own. You just end up doing other people's creativity, helping them with their stuff. But this job's perfect. I get to do a little bit of teaching. I get to do a little creative problem solving, working with a team of people, and get to do my own stuff. I have an amazing studio now because I work there. But whereas before, if I was just doing art jobs, then I never wanted to do my own art.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know if I was burned out, but it was just not as interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So given you're currently working at El Camino, right? And you freelance as well, right?
Yes, do a lot of freelancing.
El Camino is more like a stable paycheck, right? In a way.
Well, it's kind of like a landing pad. I mean, you go there to do all your base of operations, so to speak. I can do all my learning there. I can do all my exploration, any kind of growth I can have there. And there's the safety net, of course. Having been really ill in an accident, insurance is nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So these freelance jobs, I mean, they're bringing in the dough, right? What else benefits for these freelance jobs that you like to pick up and do, other than the money?
Well, there's lots of benefits to it. I mean, obviously, extra cash is really nice.
Yeah.
But I can share that with the students and stay industry relevant. Whatever field that I'm working in, I can always bring that back to the students. And since I like doing that teaching component, I can bring the newest, the most relevant, sometimes work even on the bleeding edge of something in an art industry. I have that to offer the students in the classes and for my own enrichment as well. So that's like one of the biggest benefits. I get to meet amazing people too. I mean, being in a creative environment, you just keep pushing yourself. And students are a great creative kind of melting pot, because if you want to learn how to do something, watch students try and do it and fail 100 million different ways. And those are ways you would never, ever think of failing in a million years. It's not even possible. So in doing that, you've already solved a bunch of things. You've learned a bunch of things. You've seen things, you're watching them try and troubleshoot things from upside down in a trash can, and you have no idea how they're going to come out. And they usually don't. But when they do, it's with a solution you never would have thought of in a million years. And so it keeps kind of those creative juices flowing. I mean, there's lots of benefits. to that particular environment. It adds to my own creativity. The more I work on something, the easier it is for me to work on my own stuff. Not when I'm necessarily just doing a job for somebody else, but when I'm doing all these different things, when I need to do something personally or want to, it's so easy. And nothing's as hard as half of that crap. So doing something for myself is easy. Learning a new technique is easy. I'm like a sponge at this point. New skills and new techniques come very quickly to me. And so I want to exploit that as much as possible for myself and to pass on to other people.
It's an interesting perspective in the sense that, of course, you don't tell students no when they're trying to learn something, or if they want to do it a very specific way. I think the best teachers will try to guide you and kind of gently push you to, like, you might not want to do that, but at the same time, you don't know the results will be. Probably not.
Yeah, you want to give them options.
Yeah.
You want them to know their practical limits. I mean, they need some guidance. You don't want them to be spinning their wheels for too long because you get frustrated and people want to quit things. You don't want them to encounter that just by sheer chance every 5 seconds. But you also don't want them to waste money. I mean, we're at a community college. We have a lot of people that come with various and diverse backgrounds, and so maybe they can't all afford to screw up endlessly day after day. Some of them can, and the ones who can afford it and the ones who annoy me, we let them screw up endlessly and waste their money. We also ask for donations. But yeah, no. So I don't want you to think of it as just watching them screw up. It's not about that. I mean, just watching anybody tackle anything from any diverse angle is enrichment in and of itself. For them or for us, it's that community. You build off one another. That's why classrooms are so important. Yeah. I think that's why what people are realizing right now, now that we're all stuck at home or all this stuff, that you lose the camaraderie, but you lose that creative influence. You in the arts, looking at your neighbor when they're working on something isn't a bad thing. Bad in a test in a math class, but other than that, it's the best thing in the arts. You can just observe people and learn things.
Yeah, I find that fascinating that you bring that up, because art, there's a lot of artists that are quote unquote self-made art, right? Like, as in they can paint very well, they can sculpt very well. Boom, they're projected into the limelight. But that's not the case for 90%, or not even 90%, 95% of the artists out there. We have to work as a team, and we need crits, because the work that you're making isn't the best work, right? It could be better. It could always be better, and sometimes you need somebody to interject that kind of.
Yeah, it helps you to kind of understand what you're working on, not just have this incredibly incestuous line of art because you just like it. It's therapy for myself. That's great if that's your thing, but I think art's a little bit bigger than that in general. I don't like crits in the incestuous sense, though. I bring that word in again because it really annoys me in art schools. Art, it's important.
Yeah.
And being in that creative influence of an art-related school or a heavy structured class in the arts, heavy structured program in the arts. But you can get into this thing where you're bouncing ideas and things off of one another. That it's really in the art world creatively incestuous, and it's conceptually incestuous.
Yeah.
And the world isn't like that. The world, especially since we're all communicating now, we're connected more than we ever have been globally, everything nationally. Being able to speak and focus and work just in academia or with other artists is exceptionally limiting. And it doesn't really help other people get into the arts. It doesn't help push it as much. And it also gives us those terrible stigmas that we all hate.
Yeah.
As artists, which we try to live down but usually can't. So try to open it up to other people and see and perceive art in ways that are not just your fellow artist who watched the same thing, listened to the same lecture, read the same book, knows the same ridiculous verbose language. It's bigger than that. Yeah. Those are important things.
It is,
but it's bigger.
It is.
I think art has grown exponentially in the last 20, 25 years. Probably, I guess, exponentially, maybe really only the last 10 years, if you really think about it. But there's a diverse background that you are allowed to draw from. I mean, you can make anything you want and show it and sell it online. There's a product, there's an abstract, there's a commercial, there's almost anything for anybody at any given moment because we have all this communication now. Yeah. You may be working on, I don't know, Q-tip art. I don't know what the hell that is, but maybe you're working on Q-tip art and No one gives a rat's ass about it except for this one little weird community in, I don't know, the Philippines, let's say. I'm like, okay, well, they love the hell out of it. It's something to them. Is it relevant anywhere else? No. Does it matter? Not really. I mean, if you're doing your art to be in your community, then I guess it matters. But art has such a wide and far-reaching background. Um, it, it, it's too inspired and personal for it to just be one thing anymore.
Hmm.
That's why I think programs like Art Center are really bizarre. They're amazing, and they crank out people with just incredible skills and talent and connections, industry connections. And bam, they send them off to a job. They kick ass. They make a lot of money. They do well, and that's what they do.
Hmm.
Of course, there's more gray areas and gradations in between, but that's not what art is. That's a segment of art. The people on Etsy that aren't just crafts, but make more fine art or make more pop art or anything in between. That's not all of art either. That's a segment. Galleries, people work in galleries or show in galleries. It's just a segment of art. That's it. You don't have to do fine art in a gallery anymore. And probably best if you don't.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult thing to pursue. And I'm thinking we're expanding that knowledge and that idea of art being just something you hang on a wall,
Hmm.
and sculpture not being the thing you back up into when you're trying to look at art on a wall. Um, I'd love to quote the people who came up with that, but I can't. So tough shit.
Well, yeah.
I ain't gonna name drop either. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think it's just far-reaching now, and there's so many different aspects. And moving into the almost purely digital communication age, you're God. There's so many art avenues that aren't even fully explored yet. And people are thinking, what about virtual reality? Put on a headset and then explore a gallery. I'm like, yeah, that's a really last century way of looking at virtual reality in the arts.
Mhm.
It could just be an experience.
Yeah.
It could just be the way of a means to an end. It could just be the way you develop art and then showcase, or maybe you develop it in the real world and showcase it there. Or maybe it's for just different mediums. Maybe it's for movies, video games. Maybe it is for galleries. Maybe it's for showcasing things in the community. It's always more than what you think it is.
Mhm.
So I think these limited terms for what artists are and what art should be, really they're only relevant in small little sections. As a whole, I don't think they are anymore.
Yeah.
That's why I want to get away from that incestuous culture in the arts. Art's too big for that. Why limit yourself?
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to it, I think community colleges, and also as well as you were saying, in the digital art realm, right, in a sense, I've learned from graphic designs, illustrators, and stuff, they really push their students to go into that. They're not going to be making digital art for galleries or anything. They're going to be making commercial arts for giant realms and stuff like that. The same thing can be said for El Camino College when I went to their 3D department, which is sculpting, 3D, all that stuff, 3D printing to metals. It's always like you can work in these different fields and you don't have to show in a gallery. That's our whole program
Oh yeah,
sense, yeah. Which is
yeah.
great compared to, I would say, I think metals fall under this quite a bit where there's not a lot of options, or they don't put you on a chair and like lift you up so you can see the whole world. They kind of just put you in the chair and you're sitting there and they show you this gallery. It's either you're going to do a gallery, you're going to teach, or you're just going to be some artist selling, not on Etsy, hopefully. They never said Etsy at Long Beach, but they would say you're going to sell to art dealers or things like that. You make fine jewelry and stuff of that nature. That never appealed to me. I love the material, but that never appealed to me in a sense. Yes, I do want to be in galleries, but I think I did go down that path that they did offer and show me why I sat in that chair, which was teaching. But then,
Yeah.
yeah, as I went to different colleges and learning through different programs, the way you teach is going to be totally different. And I want to change up that formula, that old formula that you were saying, that incestuous culture of like, I'm going to make my
Right.
students show in a gallery. It's like, no. That can be one of your paths, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, most people aren't artists, so let's stop teaching artists to be only known and recognized and understood by other artists. That was always a very silly thing. We did that for decades. We're moving a little bit more out of that, but I think it's not by choice. I think people are just being forced out of that.
Mhm.
You have a lot of older instructors that are still stuck in that mindset, and honestly, that's just how life goes. Socially, that's how things go. Culturally, that's how things go. The older you are, you tend to stick to something that you know well, and you tend not to expand. But I think the digital age is really forcing people to expand.
Yeah.
And at Elko, we're doing digital components to everything, almost everything. We need painting to catch up. We need ceramics to catch up, like other places. But it doesn't, photography is the best example. Did we lose film because we moved into digital photography? No, I think it just was put in its place. It's chemical heavy. It's lengthy. It's slower to learn on. I know some people really harp on about, no, it's the best to learn with film. Now, why? Why? If the principles are the same for the most part and you have more possibilities with digital and it's quicker, the learning curve is just like that. With film, it's much slower. Oh, you could be in the Zen state. And I can look through the lens, and you can look through the lens in any goddamn camera. Okay, so what? You can take your time, whatever. You want to be manic with either medium, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But digital is where it's at. But there's a fine art component in addition to that, and there's some things that need a commercial component that maybe a large format, 4x5 or 8x10 film, or if you want to do your own way of exposing things, that's all fine, But we didn't lose it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just put in its relevant place. And painting is the weird child now in that relationship, where most art and illustration is not done with a paintbrush. It's done digitally now, commercially, fine art even many times. So it needs to be taught. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to get into. It's difficult to wrap your head around how digitally things work if you have a traditional background, or just to learn the digital component in and of itself. And it relates to all the avenues, all the fields. So we don't want to be ignorant of that moving forward, but it's a hard thing to implement in classes and ideas that are more classical and antiquated in certain areas. That Elko is moving in that direction. We're just slower than everybody else.
I wanted to talk to you about the reason why I did seek you out when I first went to El Camino College. And for the listeners out there, I went to El Camino College after I got my degree from Cal State Long Beach. I was at like I wouldn't say depression state, but it was a pretty bad state in the sense that I thought I was going to have to forego art and try to support my family by working as like an office worker for the government. I thought I was going to have to go that path just to make a paycheck, and then art could be in the back burner for a bit until I got lucky and met the program at El Camino. But so one of the reasons why everyone was telling me to seek you out is because you got this cool job that allows you a bit of freedom, right? Even though it's a little bit stressing. We talked about this where
it allows great diversity.
Yeah, a lot of diversity, and you have your own studio. It's on campus, right? You can use campus resources for your art that you want to pull off. But so you get to teach. I want to be full-time teaching. Of course, my goals. You're not full-time teaching, which is your goals, right? It keeps you sane. And the thing is, though, that I think that we have a lot in common is toys. I've always wanted to make toys, which I dabbled in. I collect a lot of toys. Adrian, you collect a lot of toys.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about the work that you've got to do in the toy industry and how that even started.
I don't know if there's an exact starting point per se, but yeah, obviously, I love all things art related, and some of the more technical things happen to be in the toy arena or in at least some of the more recreational sports. So like you had, let's say, RC cars. Yeah. I loved RC cars. You had Legos. I love the hell of Legos. You can create and build, and RC cars, you can learn all these technical things. And that's what got me to do, like a bit of animatronics and stuff like that, and mechanical effects even. And then with the Legos, God, one of my earlier jobs is we had to design a spaceship, essentially. We were doing concepts, and we had all these stuff we were throwing together. And then one of the guys just took a big bucket of Legos and just threw it on the table, and I'm like, all right, I'm home. Like, it was amazing. And so I remember constructing everything and just hit it with some gray primer right at the end. And it looked like an amazing shadow model of the spaceship we ended up making. And it was cool to get paid $60 an hour to play with Legos for the most part.
That's incredible.
It was the coolest thing in the world. Yeah. And then there's people that actually do, design and build with Legos. That's how you get Legos, or how they do the public arts, or some of the sculptural stuff at those theme parks, or lands, or whatever, stores. Mm-hmm. And so those are a lot of components with that. In college, I was working special effects for my first semester. An instructor saw my stuff and said, "Hey, you got to meet these people and do these things." And I did that and got a job right away. I was really fortunate, persistent but fortunate. And in doing that, I noticed that everybody has worked in the toy industry at some point, in the entertainment industry, because it's so ubiquitous and it's so large. And you had Mattel and you had these companies that were always around, and a lot of the skills, they branch out in very familiar ways. And I remember I was working at a company, and they did, oh God, what was it? I think it was Flintstones. Yeah, they did some like Flintstones models,
Okay.
sculptures for something, and maybe it was that movie. I don't remember, but they had some props that were sitting around from it. I remember looking at that, going, "God, this is so easy." Like, the Flintstones were a very simplistic kind of shape and prop building. And I was into a lot of anime at that time. My roommates were, and they were just illegally downloading everything left and right. They'd go to their classes with their laptops, hooked up to the Wi-Fi in their bags, and they would just download while they were in class all day long. My roommates were into DBZ, and I had remembered Akira from when I was younger,
Mhm.
and they were just mad for that stuff. And so I was in class one day in one of my sculpture classes, and I just busted out like a Goku, whatever. And I showed them. They thought that was the coolest thing. And I showed it to the people at work, and they're like, "Oh, hey, can you help us with this next toy job?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And it was just easy because it was so simplified at that moment. So I was falsely thinking that toys were easy
Mhm.
because I just happened to be in an easy environment with them. And then they saw that I could do that in a relatively quick turnaround. And then I would get more and more intricate items to work on, and I was just flying through it. And we didn't realize that my background with like the Legos and the RC cars. And one other thing I didn't mention is I was really into miniatures. I never
Mm-hmm.
liked playing the games,
Yeah.
but I loved buying them, studying them, trying to make them, paint them, everything. And so my level of detail and understanding was already at a decent level. And so when I had to make these toys and these larger props, I was a little slow at first because you're on such a big scale. But then I realized what you can cheat and still have the same visual appeal. And then I started going faster and faster, and the detail was easier. I had quick cheats for that. And I was young, so I could absorb and move pretty quick with that. And ever since then, I've just been working on random toy jobs left and right, just how it kind of works.
And you have NDAs that you can't really identify the names to these companies, correct?
Most of them I can, yeah.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
So for anybody that's interested in the toy design field, it's not going to be a job where you're like just stationed at one place. You were more of a freelancer moving from base to base, right?
Yeah, or having them come to me. I mean, I'm not actually coming to my place of residence,
Yeah.
but when you have a good background, or that's why word of mouth is so important. That's why
Mm-hmm.
connections are so important. That's why you don't want to burn people. You want to give them a date, and you want to deliver early. You know what I mean? If you
Mm-hmm.
possibly can. And sometimes you can't, especially when you're starting out. You're just gonna screw up every half second. But you do your best, and you try to stay by your word. But yeah, no. So my name spread throughout different places, and then that would give me the opportunity to work from wherever I was. I'd get jobs for while I was at other jobs, and I would ask permission if I could work on them there, or if I could give them some of the money or some of the part of the job,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can continue working on it there. So I didn't have to just bounce around. But I did have a bit of that. I had one awful year where for a period of time I was going from Cal State Northridge
Mm-hmm.
to Hollywood Cinema Production Resources, which is right by LAX, to Sun Valley, and then down to downtown LA at the brewery where I was having an internship.
Oh my
And a few
God.
times I had to do all those in the same day. And it was awful. And then when things started easing up a bit, it was still nasty, where I'd be at Cal State Northridge, I'd go to Sun Valley, then I'd drive all the way down to Torrance to work at El Camino College on that commission,
Mm-hmm.
and then go back up to Northridge because that's where I lived, and just rinse repeat. But again, you got to be a yes person when you're starting out with a lot of things, and even now, I'm a yes person with some things.
Yeah.
You want to be hungry, you want to learn, you don't want to, you don't want to eliminate opportunities that you don't know where opportunities are going to take you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to, unless you hate it, you vehemently hate it and see no point to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or you're married. I don't know. Maybe that keeps you from stuff too. I have no idea because I am single, very, very single.
For all the ladies listening, Adrian's very single. If you didn't hear
I'm
it.
very single.
There you go. So let's move past who you work for, because you work for yourself as well. And there's this fun little tidbit about you, Adrian, in which you have this Banksy situation going on, in where you're making your own toy line, but no one knows that you made those toys. Nor do I even know what your artist name is, your moniker that you go by. Let's talk about that.
It's weird. Um, I've got two kind of divergent things that I do as an artist privately that sometimes reflect in commercial work and sometimes back and forth because just how art is. Art is life. Art is influence. Um, yeah, one more and more people are finding out about this alias, whatever, and this line of art that I make, this line of commercial pop art type stuff, has different permutations, but one is caught on a bit more than the others, and then the other one is more. Yeah, the other one is I don't want to say lesser known. It's really hard to define without giving a lot of it away. Um, yeah, it's no. What's weird about it is it's hard to do stuff that you're proud of sometimes and likely never get any recognition for it to the point where you don't even remember that you did it. Sometimes that really sucks, and sometimes it's kind of uplifting because you feel like you did it more for those who do get it. I think that's the biggest crossover with my personal fine art and then commercial art and then the private two facets that I work on. The other strange thing about it is when you're with somebody out and about and it comes up, it's really interesting, like how you don't even know how to react to it or do. I mean, it's like, yeah, that's interesting or cool. It's even funny when you hear people bag on stuff like that, or and the online environment's hilarious because you see people, ignorant or not, talking trash or giving props or whatever. And I think a lot of people just take things way too seriously. I know I did for many years. Maybe that's a maturity thing. Maybe that's I don't give a fuck anymore thing. I don't know what it is. But I like to think of it as just an experience for the most part. It's just you're along for the ride, man. Whatever you can get people interested in, do it. If you need to spoon feed them, do it. If you have something you want to say it. If people have things to say, just realize that it may not be relevant. You don't need to comment on everything. One thing I can't stand, though, is copying other people's stuff. That's the worst. Because you ruin their creativity in some respects. Being influenced in this appropriation thing is wonderful. We all do it. And we all do it and not even know it. But when you take someone else's art and then you make it your own version, your own whatever, fine. Sometimes that hurts a little bit because it's like, oh, this was so special to me. I was like, little baby, you took my baby. But you kind of have to get over that. Art's bigger than that. The world is bigger than that. But when they take your specific art and make it the same, put their name on it, that's where you have harm. Because if they take it further than you did, you may lose business with it. You may lose inspiration. You may lose motivation. I've had lawsuits that I've tried to file because of that. And one of the things that I worked on and still work on, someone's copying and making tons of money on it. And I've since nearly stopped making it for years because it just sucks to see everything you make. Someone takes it, makes a mold of it, copies it, photographs it, says it's theirs. They put their name on it. You got to fight that stuff, but then you have to just keep growing on your own. It's impossible to fight it completely anyway.
Well, damn, that's a damn shame, dude. That sucks to hear, but I'm glad you're still making and designing the toy no matter what. And it brings this interesting aspect to it that I wanted to ask you about was, so why keep you away from your toy, as in your name tied to the toy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing it because it's something I want to produce, I want to explore and show and share. And I think the reason why this kind of came about is that putting me in it limits the art, and I don't want to do that. One of the things, the more commercial alias, whatever that I have, I was trying to explain a concept, and I wasn't failing at it, but I couldn't explore it or explain it to the extent that I wanted to. But I didn't think of that at the time, and some people were really interested in it, and I decided to kind of explore what they were interested in and relate it to my artwork, and then just kind of snowballed into this much bigger idea that harked back to that initial concept that I had. And it's just so much bigger in scope, not in concept, but in scope than my initial idea, um, that, or initial production of it, I guess. It just kind of went on its own, and it represents a much better ideal and value of what I wanted. But putting me in it just kind of ruins it. Um, I mean, putting me specifically in it, not tying a person to it, that doesn't really matter so much. Um, and I don't want to limit it. If I'm doing, let's say, fine art for a gallery, I don't want to limit it by me either. I just want to be the best spokesman for the artwork that I can be and for the concepts that I want. I don't want them to look at me as the voice of the art. I want them to look at the art. I have to say is speaking for the art. It's like when you see an actor on an interview and you're like, God, man, I love this person in that movie. They kicked some serious ass. They were brilliant. They were complex. They had all these nuances. And then you hear them talk on a show and you're like, God, what a dumb fuck. And you're like, God, they're good. They're stupid. They're not interesting. I don't even like their voice. What? They're not American? Whatever. I think it can sometimes take away, and I'm not in the business of just being a personal entertainer. I'm wanting to give something to the world, and I think I'm the biggest limiting factor in that.
Well, I think that's interesting that you would even consider yourself the limiting factor, even though you're the creator of the piece. But it's definitely an ego thing, I would say.
If I want them just to see it for it just being there, presenting itself, and they figure out whatever they want to figure out. It's like, oh my God, a Nazi made this, or like, oh my God, this was very inspired, or it spoke to nature, or whatever. If the artwork calls for that, then that's what it calls for. I don't want to get in the way. If it doesn't call for that and needs some explanation, I would like to provide it if people want it, but I don't want me to be the focus of it. I want the artwork to be the focus of it. Otherwise, then I'm doing a performance piece on myself, and then why did I just go into acting? That wasn't the point.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, you wouldn't want to be standing there dancing, right, for a crowd, and you're not doing performance art, you're right, but you chose this path in where it's almost your non-existent. This piece of art is a personification of what you are, yet you don't want the viewer to actually see who you are, because that would just jeopardize the art in a way. So let's move on then from your art, and tell me what inspires you to make art, or what inspires you in art, for example.
Yeah, I mean, lots of things can inspire me. A lot of science inspires me. Yeah, lots of science. Other artists sometimes do. I get lost usually in their process, and then, or not lost, I want to say. I get distracted by their process. If you see people, if you know how to do a lot of things fabrication-wise, or a lot of different techniques, when you see other people do it, sometimes it's cringy, even if they're doing it right, but it's not your way. And so it's hard to watch people work on things unless they're true masters of it, or they're working on it in just a completely different way than you do. For me, anyway, I can only speak to that. But I like seeing the end results, and I love seeing, like, inspiration to me usually comes from the things that I see not for what they are, but what I am fooled into thinking they are. So if I see, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. If I look out my window, of course it's nighttime right now, this is crap, but anyway, the idea is if I look out my window and I see this little thing in the background, and I don't know what it is, but let's say my mind immediately thinks it's something specific. Like, oh, it's a spaceship or something, I don't know. My God, that's obviously not a spaceship, but it is, and it's, how could it not be? And you just look at it, and you're formulating this world behind it, this idea, this aesthetic, these concepts, this fabrication behind it, and I know it's not. And sometimes I'll investigate what it actually is. But that made my mind do amazing things on its own, almost like a dream sequence. And sometimes I like to explore things like that, and I like to do that because it feels not nurtured in the sense that I have this interest and then I built it up out of that interest. Or, hey, I looked at this artist making this and I want to copy that. Or, it's my mind wanted to do this thing on its own, or I cultivated maybe a little bit, but it was somewhat unexpected. And I think creativity lies a lot in the unexpected and the unknown. People always talk about, how can I be more creative? Well, you can totally be more creative. The more you do, likely the more creative you'll be. The more effort you put into things, likely the more experiences you have more to draw from. you have more creation to draw from, more creativity to draw from. You'll likely be more creative. That's why when you see a lot of professionals in the art field or the old masters, and they simplify their artwork and it becomes far more abstracted, but it still somehow maintains such great importance in line quality or imagery, but there's hardly anything there. They can explore that because they have either such mastery in it that they know how to reduce it, or they can just see things in either fundamentally different ways or in ways that completely transcend our experiences, and they can just plot those specific things out. Art isn't making something exactly like something else. Nor is it the thing that for years they taught this in schools, is art is using as few things as possible to convey the best thing you can. I don't understand why that was such a big deal for as long as it was. But you can draw from more. You can explore that creativity, and that's basically what I'm doing most of the time. Social issues. There's so many creative ways to explore that and get ideas across. Movies, sci-fi, and all these wonderful things to draw from. Sounds, even. What sounds amazing? I had a whole job because I listened to this album. It was some heavy metal album, but they had this weird little sequence that ended in this strange mechanical crescendo, and I thought it sounded like a massive spaceship just slowly hovering over my head, and designed a spaceship out of that. That sounds and everything that came to it. And then it turned into this music video where you'd have people dancing all around it as this spaceship comes in. It was just fun to explore that because it doesn't matter if it's silly or interesting or specific to something. It's just be open to that human experience of everything around you. The minutia, the macro, the micro, all that type of stuff. Yeah, that's what I was inspired by, just further investigation of things.
So speaking of Adrian's work and how his interests he pulls into his artwork, for example, one of his artwork blows my mind, and I don't know the name of it, but he showed me and Ray, that's who us is. It was down in his dungeon, his lab tech dungeon. It was this massive piece, just massive. I'm gonna let Adrian explain it, but Adrian, is there a name for it?
It's got a gallery placard on it that says The Abyss.
How big was that thing? Because from what I remember, it's pretty massive.
It's about, I don't know, 4.5 inches by 1.5 by nearly 2 feet tall. And it's solid resin for the most part. It's 40. It's just it's a slice of the environment, a slice of a glacier, an oceanic area with a little oil refinery kind of in the middle of it.
So as Adrian was telling you the dimensions, this thing was a honking piece, and it was beautiful. It was just the scenery in which it was like pulled out of the ocean. Just if you cut a rectangular piece out of the ocean and could freeze it instantaneously and pull it out of the ocean. But from what I've got from it was that you're looking at a scene where the oil refinery is underwater and it's just leaking, and it's messing up everything. And in between that is the beauty of the ocean and all the sedimentary rocks in between it. But the layers, it was just, in a weird term, it almost looked like a 7-layer
out of the pipes from
That's how to explain it simply, but through the ocean's eyes. And Adrian's mastery of resin allowed him to do this. And not only that, I mean, the oil refinery, to scale, was spot on. It looked like an oil refinery out of a railroad toy set, but he made this himself, and he had to use the skills of resins that he used throughout the years to layer this thing effectively, and it was beautiful. And not only that, I'm sorry I'm gushing over this piece, but he made oil come out of the little tubing,
a leaky pipe
in the resin. So this is all captured, right? He made oil spill, and it looked exactly like how oil would dissipate in water. Like, how do you do that? I was just blown away, because I've never seen Adrian's work before until that day. Yes, Adrian, pat yourself on the back, because you deserve it.
I'm gonna pat myself on the back, yay. Well, thank you, that's nice to hear.
Now, going back to the 7-layer dip, right? It's not really 7 layers. How many layers were there?
It was a lot of layers. I don't remember exactly. I'd have to go look it up. But it was well over 200 casting, and there was yeah, a lot of different techniques. There was materials that were mixed into some of the resins so that they would separate, so that I could get additional levels, layers, especially in the strata when I was working in the ocean floor. I wanted to have those layers. Everything in that floor had to be made upside down. So whatever I wanted on the surface, I had to make first, as opposed to last. And if I wanted different sedimentary layers, whatever, I'd have to mix something that had a heavier component, a component that was just kind of like it was a regular ballast, and then it had to have a much lighter component, so that you would have in one casting a layer that would have three layers, essentially three separations, and then some with more and some with less, and so that helped kind of with that visual appeal and the depth. Yeah, it's fun.
Now, it's just a fantastic piece, and I know it went into gallery. How many galleries have you shown in, actually?
Not that many. I mean, that gallery usually isn't my focus. Probably in the low 20s. Yeah, I'd probably average one once every 2 years, and of course more on certain years. But I tend not to focus too much on it. I can do fine artwork. It doesn't need to go in a gallery. I do love galleries. I do appreciate them and want to do more of them. I tend to invest a little too much of myself in a gallery show. The world comes to a grinding halt when I have to do that. For some odd reason, it's a different approach. But there's so many avenues, and I think people need to not. I think people get hung up on being a gallery artist too often. There's some galleries that can show and that you could be in and you could do that, but that's not really a means to make a living. Could, you certainly could, but that's such a tiny fraction of artists and what art really is and where it is. That if you want to pursue just that, there's many avenues to do it, but it's not really for me in that sense. When I have something I really want to share with a concept, an idea, and let it speak for itself or be there to speak with it, that's when a gallery is really good. But honestly, I usually am asked, and it's because someone wants to see something more of mine or thinks something might be right up my alley or something they want me to produce. And if time permits, I'm happy to oblige. I mean, if people are interested in something about you, pursue that thing.
I love that you always add a inspirational quote that ties not back into yourself, but you push it onto others in a really nice way. And I wanted to talk about this last question, right? I'm a big Mr. Rogers fan.
Mhm.
The whole reason why this thing was called the Collective Neighborhood to begin with was because of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and I just wanted to bring a kindness back into art, in a sense. And his whole thing about it was taking the time to reflect on your past during the present and remembering all the kind things people have done for you and helped you achieve to be who you are today. So here's my question. Here's your final question, Adrian. Are you ready? What's the kindest thing that someone has ever done for you in the art field?
Yeah, the kindest thing. Believing in me, wanting me to pursue things. Kindest things. Kindest. It's kind of a weird thing. I think I've been very. I don't know. I think I've been very fortunate to have a lot of wonderful things come my way in the arts from people that either appreciated what I was doing or was inspired or moved. Um, I have one thing that sticks out pretty prominently. I had a coworker a number of years back, probably about 5 years ago. Yeah, we became partners on something, and then they saw an artwork of mine. I guess they didn't know I had made it, and we stopped work that day, and they stared at it and just kept talking about it, and staring at it and staring at it, and I'm like, and I kept it covered up for years. It's not that I wasn't proud of it; it was just a very personal piece, and I didn't think it was that successful to show every 5 seconds. And they were upset that I had it covered up, and it was this. It almost seemed kind of contrived, the reaction, because I wasn't expecting that kind of reaction. And for 4 hours, they sat at it and stared at it and cried, and we talked, and we had this incredible moment appreciating just art in general. But it was spurred by this piece I made that spoke to them, and the reason why I bring this up is they said something that was profound. They said that when they saw this artwork of mine, that something inside them changed. I was like, whoa. And they elaborated a bit and said that they wish they could have a smaller version of it, which I've been for many years trying to figure out a way to do with little to no success. That they'd want to carry it on them always to remember that moment. And I was like, Jesus, that's such a beautiful sentiment. And I've since put it out. I no longer keep it all covered up. I keep it out and proud of it. But the idea that you can not just touch somebody in that creepy way, no, but touch somebody intellectually, creatively, spiritually, whatever you want to call it, in such a way that something seemingly fundamental changes in your view or thoughts or appreciation about the world, I think that's about the biggest thing you can kind of do. And I certainly didn't seek it, nor that I thought I would produce something like that. But to have that reaction, it meant a lot because I know exactly what that feeling's like. Because I've had that. You've probably had that as well with something. And to know that I was that for somebody, unintentionally even, definitely, I'll just transport that over to a gift. It was definitely the biggest gift I was ever given, and most motivational thing I was ever given. And I hope to do that for other people as well, to show them the appreciation that I have for their stuff.
That's fantastic to hear. Thanks so much for sharing. And I hope you do achieve that goal on spreading that type of kindness and love for others' arts. So apologies for the abrupt ending right there where Adrian doesn't really reply to what I've just said. It's because we actually lost that little bit at the end where he responds and then I say, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview you, and then conclusion. Just thank God we lost that little bit and not the entire interview. We were hitting the end of it anyways. And I want to thank you personally for listening to the entire podcast through the end. And it's time for me to go explore other neighborhoods, so I'll see you guys around next time.